Okay, looks like we're on air for our 11th TILO Presents session. My name is Carrie Rasek, and I am the Integration Specialist here at Rossford Schools in Northwest Ohio, and I will be the moderator for today's session. And today with us we have Dr. Michael Martin. He is going to be presenting his A.R.T. or Art of Blended Learning session for about the next hour. And he will also have the Q&A is open on the side. If you click on the left side, there should be a Q&A button. You can enter your questions there for Mike during the presentation, and he will address those. And he'll also be using that for links that he would like to share with you during the session. So keep that in mind as well. So without further ado, we'll get started. I'll pass it over to Mike.
Good afternoon. And thank you for participating in today's webinar. I would like to, as I pull up our presentation, I would like to admit that this is my first actual online webinar. So please forgive me for any mistakes I may make in the process. I have done this presentation for live audiences. Doing it online it's a new one for me. So I'm pulling up our presentation. Hopefully we can all see that there.
Yep, looks good.
So what I have here on this first screen is just a quick do now. And I have defined blended learning and provide examples at this website. And then below that, I have list as many 21st century skills as you can. That's the one I'd like you to take a look at. I posted that to the chat section. It's this one right here. I also posted the blended learning self-assessment there as well. But the second one is the first one that I'd like you to take a look at. So click on that, head over to the back channel, and just begin to list as many 21st century skills as you can. I'll give you about a minute for this. And while you're doing that, I will go on and talk about today's learning targets, because being a good teacher, I think that we need to have learning targets. First of all, I probably should introduce myself a little bit more. As she said, my name is Dr. Martin. I am a high school and middle school principal at Buckeye Central High School, my alma mater, where I graduated from. This is my first year in this role. For the previous 6 years, I was a principal, a school administrator at a school called Pioneer. It's a career technology center. And that was in Shelby, Ohio. So this is my 7th year in administration. Before that, I taught for 10 years in the classroom, where I taught history and government. Also in the process, I have been an adjunct professor as well. So I teach at college level courses. At the master level, I teach curriculum instruction. I teach improving classroom instruction. And so I think one thing that you'll get a feel for in this webinar is how I think technology can play in high quality classroom instruction. And what does that look like? So our learning targets are this. I would like you to define blended learning with a 100% accuracy when this is said and done. List 3 reasons for having blended learning in your classroom. List 5 21st century skills as well, something that we're starting right now with this back channel. List and use 3 word stems from Webb's depth of knowledge. Name and describe the 3 levels of the art continuum. And research and use 9 separate 21st century tools, 3 from each level of the art continuum.
Hey, Mike, one question. Can you share that link again?
Certainly. Hopefully it's working. It was working as of yesterday. And it was one of those days where I didn't get I'm going to click on it myself. Yep, there it is. So it should take you to a Google Doc.
Okay. Thanks.
Are we there now?
Yep, that should be good.
Okay. And we had some technology issues within the school. So I'm actually in an alternative office right now. And I have two offices since there's two buildings here that I run, the middle school and the high school. So I will flip back and forth between my presentation and the Google Hangout. So that way I can see if there's any questions. Or Carrie, if you could do me a favor, could you read those questions to me since I can't see those right now? If anything comes up in the chat box.
Yes, I'll be watching the chat box. And
Awesome.
I'm looking at the Google Doc is view only currently. Did you want us to? Yeah, there you go.
Well, I can't really share it with people, can I? See, now I have it that anyone on the internet can find and access this. There is no sign-in required.
If you can change that to find and yeah. Well, if you go back to the share, and there should be, if you go down to the bottom, yeah, and make it find and edit rather than find and.
That's not one of my options
You
here.
don't have any options. Huh.
No, it's because I'm on a different computer and I share it with myself.
Yeah. Well, we'll just think about them in our heads. That's okay.
I apologize for that. This is what happens when they get sent to a second different office. So that will play a small role, but I think you're right, Carrie. Let's go ahead and just think about those in your head because this will come up here in just a minute. So let's start in the beginning of this whole journey in creating the art and creating the art continuum and in writing my book. The first thing that happened was, over the past 7 or 8 years of administration and of research, I've been in and out of a lot of schools watching teachers utilize technology in the classroom. I hear a lot about 21st century skills, and I hear a lot about this blended learning. But in that process, one of the things that I noticed a lot, and I also noticed this by going to a lot of conferences on 21st century skills, is that we would see things such as this. We would see these great lists of 21st century tools like QR codes, Doceri, Reflector, Socrative, Prezi, Animoto, Poster Maker, Glogster, Educreations, all of those. And of course, I think the best ones that are out there, the GAF. But we saw a lot of those, and while those are good, I always kind of left frustrated with those schools or those conferences because those aren't 21st century skills. Those are 21st century tools. Don't get me wrong, those are robust tools, those are powerful tools, they're great collaboration tools, but they're tools that you would use to teach the skill. So that's kind of what got me in this whole process of really looking at blended learning and how 21st century skills play a role in that process. So it got me thinking, what are 21st century skills? How do those skills look in the classroom? Is there a connection between 21st century skills and the digital tools that students use? If there is, what does that look like? And how does blended learning look like? What does that look like? And as a school who's embarking on a one-to-one initiative, should schools even embark on true blended learning initiatives? And I think they should, but I believe there's a lot of prep work that needs to go into that process that a lot of schools overlook. So if you don't mind for a few minutes to give you the backstory, let's just take a journey with me over the past 7 or 8 years. I like to call it a mind walk, and this is kind of what my mind really looks like. There's a lot going on in my mind, as I'm sure you guys have as well. But there's a lot of things that have impacted and influenced the direction that I've gone that has gone into the creation of the art continuum or the art blended model. First of all, let's start with this. let's start with the fact that schools in our current state of form truly are becoming dangerously irrelevant. When we think about our students and who they are, when we think about, and this I have to believe for many of you is not new, but when we think about our students, here's some stats that came out about a year and a half ago, so they're even a little outdated now. But students between the ages of 13 and 18 are spending 11 hours a day on some sort of digital media. 8 to 12 years old, they're spending 6 hours a day. Now, a lot of that's obviously multitasking. They're doing multiple things at once. You know, they're texting, they're watching a video on TV or on their phone. They're also doing social media at the same time. So it's not, 11 straight hours, but it's 11 hours worth of media time. And as I dug into this, I saw that 46% of students would read for homework, and another 46 would read for play, or 44 would read for pleasure. And that stat has always kind of stuck out in my mind. I haven't quite figured out totally what that stat means yet, but it's always stuck out in my mind that we have more students reading for homework than we have reading for pleasure. I typically like my children reading for pleasure. And then stat number 5 down there, 45% of teens use social media every day, but only 36% enjoy it. Now that's a powerful stat too, being a principal, let me just tell you, because there's a lot of social media issues that come through our buildings. We're only 36% enjoy it. That's a whole nother conference. That's a whole nother technology discussion about why students use something that they dislike so much. And then stat number 6, I think, is something that drives me every day still. And it's that a vast majority of our teens consume media. They consume so much media and information, but only a small few of our students create content, or at least create meaningful content. And I read in the library, the Journal of Library Science, a number of years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, and it's one of those articles that stood out in my mind. That article said, and I know it's an exaggeration, but the point's good. And the article said that if we continue to produce or create consumers of content as opposed to producers of meaningful content, technology will drive us into the dark ages again. I thought that was a pretty fascinating article, a fascinating outlook. So when I talk about technology, using technology in the classroom, one of the things I talk to my teachers a lot about is having our students create meaningful content as opposed to just consuming content all the time. So I think schools are becoming dangerously irrelevant because this is who our students are. But on the right-hand screen is typically still what schools look like. Over here, this is still what our schools look like for the most part. And maybe yours doesn't, and if it does not, great, good for you. But being a researcher, a person who travels and studies schools, that's still the very typical classroom. As I walk up and down my halls, that's still a typical classroom. As I go into my daughter's school, they go to a Catholic school, that's your typical classroom. But our students on the left here, this is who we have right here, and this is what we have them do. And so our students are at risk of becoming dangerously irrelevant. These 3 kids here, what do you think that these 3 kids may have in common? Take a look at these 3 young kids here. Is there anything that pops on your mind that you think they have in common? Yeah, they all have dark hair. Yeah, they're all young. But let's go a little bit deeper and more meaningful than that. What might these 3 kids have in common? Well, these 3 kids have made a whole lot of money making apps. Younger than middle school, high school students, owning businesses, putting out meaningful content for students to use, for adults to use, for people to use. But these are very, very wealthy young men. And these people are in our classrooms. And this is what their classrooms probably still look like right here as well. So if you look at this slide, you see a lot of different ways in which students or adults, people in general, can learn content. And I love this quote. I stole this from Khan Academy, and there's this illusion that is created in our classical education system, and even at the university level, that someone is teaching it to you. Really, they're creating a context in which you need to pull information and own it yourself. And so there's this movement out there that really is taking a large section, a large market share of what schools have typically done. And if we keep at this pace of how we're doing things, again, I come back to this, I think that we are on the brink of becoming dangerously irrelevant. So with all that in mind, what are schools doing? And let's talk about your classroom. What does it look like, honestly? And if not your classroom, what does the classrooms in your school look like? And of course, here's a picture of Rip Van Winkle, and I think we probably all heard that phrase. If Rip were to wake up today, the only place that he would feel comfortable at is in our schools. And what I'm going to say is, even with the technology integration that we've had and the disruption that we've had over the past 2 decades, schools, on the most part, have not moved, at least meaningfully moved, to look at how their education is being delivered. Despite the lives our students live, despite the world that they engage in, and the devices that they use, we still have not meaningfully yet adapted to who they are, to who our customers are. So what does this mean for kids? Well, the great thing about kids is this. If you ask kids, they'll tell you. They will be flat out honest. And they'll tell you that the classes they sit in are irrelevant to them as well. Taking notes off the projector, doesn't work because it doesn't help them understand. It's mindlessly writing down notes. That's a key word, mindlessly writing down notes, because I'll come back to a word like that later on. The second quote I pulled: I don't like it when a teacher just talks all period without some kind of visual or anything. It's just boring. They fall asleep. Our students are consumed by media. They're used to seeing visuals all the time. It's a part of who they are. Whether we like it or not, it's who they are. So we need to create an environment that's organic to their lives. Getting a packet, read the book and find answers, then finish it for homework. And instead of understanding what it is, or just simply when a teacher continues to write down notes on the board, they don't learn anything. So students will tell you, and the way that a lot of schools are delivering education, some of my own here at Buckeye Central, is not the style that fits their needs. Again, we can go back to the 1800s model of all this, the factory model. Schools are still aligned to the factory model, and I'm sure most of us listening to this webinar have heard that before as well. And there's a reason for it. That factory model, when it was first created in the late 1800s, early 1900s, was great. It was awesome. It worked. It did a fantastic job. It was perfect for the 1800s, 1900s. It was great for the 20th century economy, because it's what we needed then. The problem is, it's no longer necessary. It doesn't fit the needs of our economy today. It doesn't fit the needs of our students today. And because of that, again, I come back to the fact that we're becoming dangerously irrelevant. So as we think about that factory model, here's something I'm just throwing out there that's on my Google Plus page, and it's caused some good debate, is this idea of the factory model of scientific management versus what I call a contemporary behavioral science. And I know there's lots of words there, and I'm not going to bore you to death with all of that. But when you look at those, you'll see that it's, number one on the left-hand side is scientific management. It's, replace working by the rule of thumb. We want habit. We want common sense. There should be scientific method to study the work and determine ways to be successful. Number two was don't simply assign workers to just any job. Match workers to their jobs based on their capability and motivation. 3 was monitor work performance, provide instruction, supervise them, ensure that they're using the most efficient ways of doing things, because employees at that time really didn't know what was best for them, and supervisors did. And allocate the work between managers and workers. So the managers spend their time planning and training. What I'm saying is, if you come to the right-hand side, if we look at contemporary science, we should do this. Number 1, we should replace measuring work or success by rote standardization, and instead use modern social science methods to determine the most efficient way to measure specific tasks. Number 2, rather than simply teach all students the same, match students' strengths and interests to individual capability and motivate and teach all of them differently. Number 3, assess individual academic and skill performance, provide instruction and coaching to ensure that all students are using the most efficient ways of learning to achieve self-regulation. And then number 4 was share the work responsibility between administration and teachers and students. Remove the functional silo of education so that the team can spend their time planning, learning, and growing, allowing for greater performance and efficiency from all participants involved. So it's a different way of thinking. So with that different way of thinking in mind, as I think about what needs to happen in school, here's what I think we need to do. I think that we need to use those tools that are organic to our students' lives. I think we need to use the tools that are part of who they are. I think we need to use those tools to teach them those 21st century skills that we all know they need to have to be successful. But in the process, I think we have to make sure that we are using what I call cognitive consumption. We are feeding our students a healthy dose of cognitive challenges. And if we do this, I think we will help at least start the process of preparing our students to be successful in the 21st century economy. So as we go through the rest of this presentation, I'm going to focus on the skills, the cognitive consumption, as well as the tools, because these 3 things align. I'm hoping can, as I said, push us in the direction of preparing kids for the 21st century economy. One thing that I need to get off my chest right now and just move forward with is this. I will call them 21st century skills, but it drives me crazy because it's 2016. We're 16 years into the 21st century. I just want to call them skills. But I draw that distinction now because I think it proves a point. It's 2016, and we're still calling them 21st century skills because they're not a part of our lives yet. And we're 16 years into it. So we're not at the point where these skills are at least ingrained into the average educator's lives across Ohio or across the states in general. Okay, so how do we do all this I just talked about? How do we create blended learning? What does blended learning look like? How do we define blended learning? And that's probably the place to start, is defining blended learning. What is it? Because you need to have something that operationalizes your process. So here's what I'm going to go to. I'm going to go to the Clayton Institute, the Clayton Christensen Institute for Disruptive Innovation. If you have not had a chance to see these guys or read these guys or be to their website, please do so. It's a fantastic source. So here's how they define it. They say there's 3 pieces to blended learning. Number 1, at least in part through online learning with some element of student control over time, place, path, and or pace. So that needs to happen to be blended learning. Number 2, at least in part in a supervised brick and mortar location away from home. And then number 3, and the modalities along each student's learning path within a course or subject are connected to provide an integrated learning experience. So that's how they define it. So to make that a little bit easier, I'm gonna summarize it this way. In short, blended learning is a multimodal learning experience specifically crafted by the teacher to provide an integrated learning experience which will allow the learner, our students, partial control over when, where, and how he or she will learn. Within this model of education, the delivery of instruction no longer solely occurs in a brick and mortar setting, but rather in a click and mortar setting. So that's how I will operationalize that. Now, I know some of these slides are word heavy, and I'm doing that on purpose because with the book just coming out this month, and people not everybody having access to the book, I thought the content was pretty important, and I wanted to be there for those of you who wanted the content. So here's what I'm saying. I'm going to go ahead and kind of look at blended learning a little bit differently than what that was just used to as well. I will use that definition to operationalize it, but I also should point out some distinct differences that clarify my view of blended learning. So I think that blended learning, if it's going to be as impactful as it could be, the teacher needs to remain the content expert and the instructional leader of the classroom. We have great teachers. We develop and create great teachers, and they are the experts. They need to stay the expert in the classroom. I don't like that quote from the Khan Academy. I like it, but it scares me. I like it because it makes me stay focused on my job. I don't want to be replaced. I don't want the teachers to be replaced. I want them to remain outside the student, the most important thing in the classroom. And number two, with my view of the blended learning, the device and digital tool of choice is nothing more than a tool for the teacher. Three, while blended learning certainly does provide an opportunity for students to have some control over when, where, and how, it should only play, in my view again, a supplemental role to the educator. And I'll explain in more detail. And then four, the majority, I believe, of instruction should occur during the class time with the supervision of the classroom expert, the content expert, our instructional leader in the classroom, the teacher. That's where the majority of the teaching should take place. Again, this is just my belief. I know it goes away from what some people out there believe, but again, I think I will kind of help prove that point here in the next couple slides. But one thing that I do want to point out that's pretty important while we're talking about it, if the majority of teaching should happen in the classroom, and we're talking about using the device in the classroom, Harvard University came out with a great study in October or November, that area. And they surveyed teachers, students, blended learning, technology integration experts. They surveyed parents. They surveyed a number of people. And what they found through all the research is this, that real high quality technology integration should only include technology being used during the hour of instruction time 30 to 40% of that time. 30 to 40% of your time should be used with the device. Closer to 30 than 40, preferably. And so while the device certainly is a tool to be used, it's simply that, just a tool that the teacher uses when appropriate for the students to be successful. And here's the traditional, the flipped classroom version, and then the blended classroom version. You know, on the left-hand side here, we have the traditional where teacher lectures, students go home with activities, memorize stats, regurgitate those stats on a test, get an A and move on. With the flipped classroom, they can watch the lecture at home, and then they can come into school and do some classroom activities. What I found through discussion with a number of teachers around the state of Ohio, and this doesn't go for everybody, but certainly a number of them, is students don't tend to go home and watch those lectures, or they don't tend to go home and do the work that was given to them on their devices. Maybe at first they do because it's new, they're excited about it, but over time, when the newness wears off, they tend not to follow through. And so with the blended version of using the device in the classroom and the device going out of the classroom, you know, for supplemental reasons, but the majority of the time spent with instructions in the classroom, you don't typically run into that issue where students aren't prepared to be in class that day. So here's some benefits to I think my definition, my view of blended learning. If the students are using the device and the tool with you in your classroom every day, teachers have an opportunity to model that tool for those students, first of all. They have an opportunity to assess the students' use of the tool and make corrections when and where appropriate. The teacher has an opportunity to assess a number of the 21st century skills, such as media literacy, while students are working. And the teacher has the ability to allow for intervention, enrichment, and extended learning when appropriate outside of the school day. My version of blended learning isn't significantly impacted when students lack devices or internet at home, because the majority of instruction happens in the classroom in the click and mortar setting. And my version of blended learning avoids the homework trap, because kids sometimes don't watch the videos at home. They don't watch the lectures at home. They don't watch those things at home. And so when they come back to school the next day, they're not ready to go. So I call it the 4 Ns. It's intentional, integrated instruction in the classroom or in person. Okay, so all that being said, now that we've operationalized the definition of blended learning, let's take a look at the rest of the pieces that come to form a really good blended learning model. The first one is the curriculum. It's the content. It's those 21st century skills. That's the first thing that comes to mind. And what you'll see on the screen here is a nice dichotomy that I've created over the last year and a half. If we look at the 20th century, which is the factory model of learning, which is kind of how schools look today, here's what employers wanted. They wanted people to show up on time. They wanted them to have a strong work ethic, and they wanted them to complete simple tasks hundreds of times per day. That's the factory model. And below that, I have rote memorization. They wanted people to just simply memorize actions, memorize facts, whatever it may be. They wanted rote memorization. And here's what rote memorization is, by definition: the use of memory, usually with little intelligence, or mechanical or unthinking routine or repetition, because that's what the economy called for in the 20th century. But if we move to the 21st century, over here on the right side, here's what our economy calls for. And this is just a fraction of it. Working in teams, making decisions, solving problems, communicating verbally, communicating written, and there's written communication, processing lots of information, and not just processing it, reading for information, allocating the correct information, and then processing that correct information, analyzing quantitative data. Then, of course, the technical knowledge that's related to their job as well. And that's just a fragment of it. That's just a fragment of the skills. And it's much different than what you saw in the 20th century. So we need to have a system that prepares our students to do that and to do more things that we don't know about yet. And so if there's a dichotomy that I can draw that explains the 20th century versus the 21st century, I would call it rote versus rigor. 20th versus 21st would be rote versus rigor. So we need to teach those 21st century skills to our students. And I know we were supposed to have, in the beginning of this webinar, we were supposed to have a list where you went to and you created it, and I apologize for that not working. But when we look at those 21st century skills, there's a number of organizations out there that have come up with them. But looking at all of those organizations over the last couple of years, there's 2 organizations that are very, very powerful across the nation when it comes to 21st century skills. They have a lot of influence, and most educators and businesses look at these 2. And that would be the P21 framework for 21st century skills, and of course, ISTE. And here's what they are. And it's communication, it's collaboration, it's creativity, it's critical thinking, it's information skills, it's media skills, it's technology skills. And there's a lot that goes into all of those. But our students have to be able to communicate orally. They have to be able to do it verbally. They have to be able to have written communication, strong written communication skills. They have to be able to collaborate in person and in the virtual world as well. Creativity is one that I think we're losing out on. Industrial arts, those programs are going by the wayside. The school that I'm a principal at right now did not have an art program. This current year does not have an art program K through 8. I'm implementing one in the middle school next year, thank goodness. There's nothing there K through 8. Critical thinking. Let's get kids to stop memorizing facts and regurgitating out numbers and get them to think. Get them to think for themselves. And so the 21st century skills are far different than the 20th century skills. So this is what we have to prepare our students to do. And we have some tools out there that can do that. We have great digital tools that can do that. We just have to have a model that we can turn to that helps us do that. So I like to tell people it's time. It's time that we get rid of the factory model. It's time that Rip Van Winkle trades in his Model T Ford for something newer, something brighter, something flashier, something better, something that fits the 21st century economy. All right, so now that we know what the skills are, I still believe no matter what it is we're doing in the classroom, we have got to have our students thinking. We've got to challenge them cognitively. We have got to feed them opportunities of cognitive challenge. So I call that cognitive consumption. One of the great things about writing a book is you get to make up words, and it's a lot of fun. So I call this cognitive consumption. I want my kids, I want my students consuming cognitive challenges every day. That's what I want. And we can create a model of blended learning that allows a teacher or shows a teacher how to create a lesson with that teaches skills, 21st century skills, and also allows them to determine what level of thought process they want their students to be challenged at. Now I'm gonna go back to 2008. I know we're in an election cycle right now, so I'm not trying to be political here or anything. But this is a quote right out of from President Obama. He's calling on our nation's governors and state education chiefs to develop standards and assessments that don't simply measure whether students can fill in a bubble on a test, but whether they possess 21st century skills like problem solving, critical thinking, entrepreneurship, and creativity. So we have those standards, and we now have those tests. In Ohio, it's the AIR test. Last year it was the PARCC test. Now it's the AIR test. Students are forced to think critically. Some of those, I've went through some of those exercises, some of those problems that they offer you. There are some challenging questions out there, to be sure. And we need to have an environment in our classroom that prepares our students to be successful on that test, as well as being successful in the 21st century economy. And this is, and this curriculum and this assessment model is being pulled from those Common Core state standards. I know it's a boring slide. I apologize. I tried making it more exciting. The old PARCC assessments, Bloom's revised taxonomy, Webb's depth of knowledge, the AIR assessments, of course, it's the same thing, those higher order thinking skills. What I focus on, though, of all these is Webb's depth of knowledge, Webb's DOK. So what I have here now is on the slide is what I call then versus now assessment rigor. On the left-hand side is before the Common Core, is before the PARCC, is before the AIR assessments. Looking at the old standards and the old tests. And what you'll see is on the top, it says memorize, recognize, identify, implement procedures, demonstrate, understand, prove, analyze, solve novel problems, draw connections, okay? And in mathematics, 1% of standards or questions actually made you do this. English was 4%. See, on the right-hand side is the higher level stuff. And you see the percentages that showed up in the previous standards is pretty low. Now, if we move to the now, to the Common Core, to the new assessments, to the next generation assessments, what you'll see over here is Webb's depth of knowledge. This is depth of knowledge 1, 2, 3, and 4. What this simply is this is your lower level understandings and this is your higher level understandings. But as you look at it, you'll see higher percentages of questions falling in the higher levels of thought processes. So in other words, what's happening is the new standards and the new tests are providing much more challenging cognitive opportunities for our students. The cognitive consumption has gone up. So therefore, the cognitive consumption in our classroom must also go up. I love that slide. I think it's a fascinating piece of data. Okay, so here's your basic cognitive models. We had Bloom's back in the day, then we have revised Bloom's, and we have now what I like to refer to as Webb's depth of knowledge, Webb's DOK. And I like using that because, and I've been having this conversation with my teachers now that we're in the part of OTES, we're meeting to have our summative assessment meetings. I like to talk about web's depth of knowledge because I want my teachers understanding this. When researchers are looking at the new standards, when they're categorizing those new standards, they're using web's depth of knowledge to do that. And what web's depth of knowledge is doing, it's asking our teachers not just to think about the verbs they use in their questions, but to think about the product that they're forcing the students to do. And what is that product asking the students to do? Is it asking them to just reproduce something, to recall information, or is it asking them to master a skill or a concept, or is it even doing something better? Is it forcing them to think strategically? So I like web's depth of knowledge. So in the book, this is what I use. And in my lesson plan model, which I'll provide for you, this is what we use. Let me give you an example of a modern day math problem. I'm going to read it because I like to read this problem, but here's what it says. A result of global warming is that ice of some glaciers is melting. 12 years after the ice disappears, tiny plants called lichen start to grow on the rocks. Each lichen grows approximately in the shape of a circle. The relationship between the diameter of the circle and the age of the lichen can be approximated with this formula. Now, where D represents the diameter of the lichen in millimeters and T represents the number of years after the ice has disappeared. So the question is, Anne measured the diameter of the lichen and found it was 35 millimeters. How many years ago did the ice disappear at this spot? Show your calculation. That's a challenging question because it's asking our students to use multiple math skills to answer that question. These are the things that our students are being asked to do. So we need to create lessons that use tools that are organic to their lives, teach 21st century skills, but yet still provide this kind of cognitive consumption. All right, so far I've talked about those 21st century skills. I've given you a little bit about the web's depth of knowledge and the need for cognitive consumption. The rest of this will go into the actual blended model I've created and the tools that you can use to implement that model. All right, so what does blended learning look like? There's all sorts of examples out there. Up here we got the Clayton Institute. Here we got TPAC. Here we got the RAT model. And here we have the Samar model. And the two main ones that I found in research throughout the years that spoke the most to me was the Samar model and the RAT model. So this is kind of what's happening. Over the past 8 to 10 years, if not longer, this is how teachers have been using technology on their own. The Samar model is this. Teachers either use technology as a form of substitution for what they were doing currently with pen and paper, or they're augmenting their lessons and using technology to augment it, or they're modifying it and they're doing a little bit more technology, or they're redefining. It's the redefinition area where they're redefining what's happening in the classroom because of technology. Now the RAT model over here, it's kind of the same thing. The first level here is they're using technology to replace what they were currently doing with pen and paper, pencil and paper, or maybe they've amplified what's happening in the classroom because of the technology. The technology has created more opportunities than they had before. Or they're transforming their classrooms and they're changing how education was done before because of technology. So what it's been so far is just a natural, human, organic process. And I like this picture for a reason. This is you see at Berkeley. In the late 90s, early 2000s, when they built a large part of the new campus, they came in, they put the buildings up, they put the grass in, they put the trees in, they put all that stuff in. But they didn't put any sidewalks in. None. And they walked away and they left it. And they said, listen, they told the people at Berkeley, listen, we're going to come back after your first year of school. And then what we're going to do is take aerial pictures of your campus, and the students will tell us by their footprints, by the paths they make, the best places to put the sidewalks. Far be it for me to understand how students are going to use which direction they're going to go, how they're going to get from building to building. Students will do that on their own. So let's let them come in and do it. And then a year later, we'll put in the sidewalks. Let the users create the process, which I thought was brilliant. And so when I think back about blended learning, we've been kind of doing this with this slide right here. I can look back at research and say, this is just typically how teachers have been doing it for years. And when I think about it, when I look at all the teachers that I have looked at and researched over the past 7 or 8 years, they've been doing similar things too. So there's been a natural, organic way in which teachers have been using technology. Far be it from me. I'm not arrogant enough to believe that I can come in and create the perfect model and teach people a brand new thing. I'd rather sit back and look at how the users have perfected the technology and say, okay, what can I learn from them to create a model? And that's kind of what I've done here. And that's where I came up with the ART model, because I think teaching is an art. I really do. I think it's an art. Actually, I know it's an art. There's science out there that can make the art better. There's neuroscience that makes the art better. There's the science of teaching and learning that makes the art better, but it's still an art. And when I think about what I have seen teachers do over the last 7 to 10 years, and what I have read in the research, I've come up with this, the ART model. I think teachers, quite often, when they're using technology, they assimilate, meaning they do similar things than what they were doing previously with just pencil and paper, only they're doing it now with a computer. Or they're redesigning their lesson plans. They're using technology to ramp up their lesson plans a little bit more. Or they're doing transfiguration, meaning they're just totally transforming how the school looked before as well. So I call it the ART model. Now, before I go any further, there's something powerful about this ART model that I've come up with that I haven't seen in any other model. And I think it's a key piece in training our teachers on how to use technology in the classroom. So let's go to this next slide. I'll kind of explain this process to you. Diagnostics are really important. We ask our teachers to give diagnostic assessments for a reason, because we learn a lot of information about our students in that process. For example, if we just knew that Johnny scored a 35 on a pretest, that wouldn't mean much to us. We wouldn't know what 35 meant or represented. But if we take a look at information and say, okay, it was a 100-point test and Johnny scored a 35 on it, now that information becomes a little bit more meaningful. We know now that Johnny doesn't know nearly as much as he probably should, and he has a lot of room to grow. But we have a starting point with Johnny, don't we? So if we were to create a continuum right here, which we do between 0 and 100, we know Johnny's right here. And we know what he doesn't know. We can go back, look at the assessments, we can look at the material he does not know, and we can put a plan together to get Johnny from here to as close to this as we possibly can. That's what good teaching is. The same thing should occur for teaching our teachers. So if we could create a continuum on technology integration, we might be able to help our teachers move to becoming better technology integration teachers. Let me give you an example. Let's say we had a continuum and it looked like this. Over here, we have, I love my number 2 pencil. What great technology. Here we have teachers assimilating, using technology to do the same things they're doing with the pencil, just with a computer. Here we have teachers redesigning. They're changing what's happening. They're starting to ramp up their lesson plans, and they're starting to use more technology in their classrooms, and they're changing what's happening. Or here they totally transfigure. It's much more beautiful than it was before. It's so much better than it was before because of technology. If we had some sort of assessment that we could give our teachers to take that would put them on this continuum somewhere, then we would know how and where to move them. So that's kind of what the ART model has created. So for example, if you were to take my blended learning continuum assessment, and you were to score in the Assimilate range, you would know you were right here. But as an instructional leader, as a leader of the building, I would know if this is where you are, then I would know this is the next step that I need to get you. And I would know how to get you from here to here. And I would know the tools, because I'm going to show those to you. And I would have lesson plans, because I'm going to show those to you. And I'm going to have examples, and I'm going to show those to you of how to move someone from here to here. So it becomes a way for us to define blended learning, It becomes a model for us to use. It becomes a continuum as well, but it also becomes a main driver for teacher education as well. That's really why I like it, and I really get pretty excited about it. Let me give you an example. Actually, I apologize. This is just the ART model one more time. So assimilate is to cause something to resemble or liken. So you want teachers to assimilate what they were doing before just with technology, because we want it to be something that's actionable, that's achievable, that they can do right now, so we can help acclimate them to the computer, to the technology, because a lot of times we give devices to teachers who haven't used them, and it's too much for them too fast, and they don't want to deal with it. So let's start them out at a simple stage where they can actually do something that's actionable and achievable, and then they feel confident and they can grow with it. Then there's the redesign phase. And if you define that, that means to design something again in a different way. So we're going to take a lesson plan, we're going to design it again in a different way, using technology to redesign it, to ramp up the technology use, the cognitive consumption as well, and to reconstruct what was happening in our classrooms. And then the last one is transfigure. That's to transform into something much more beautiful or elevated than what it was before. And here we want to transfigure our classrooms. We want to topple down the walls that surround our classroom, or the physical ones as well as the psychological ones. And we want to start connecting students to a world of opportunities that they wouldn't have before. And connect is one of those words I made up. It's using technology to connect our students to learning experiences they otherwise wouldn't have. I call it connecting. I'm like the Dr. Seuss of academic writing. It's kind of fun. All right, so let me give you an example. It's kind of hard to read because this is a PDF that came out of the book. But with the pen and pencil phase right here, I taught government, so it's, again, we have an election cycle right now. So typically teachers, government teachers would lecture about each candidate and their political positions. And students would take notes on those, and they would start to understand the Republicans believe this, and the Democrats believe this. This candidate believes this, and this candidate believes that. They would start to understand that. That's pen and pencil. The assimilate stage of this will be this. Teacher replaces the paper with a Google Doc. Students log on, listen to the teacher, and they take notes. Not too difficult. We can have teachers who do not know how to use that technology do that. It's something that they can assimilate. It's actionable. It's achievable. And it will help acclimate them to the process. Now let's go down to the redesign stage. If a teacher were to be teaching the same thing that we did here with the pencil, but only at the redesign stage, here an example would be a teacher allows students to go online, to research the candidates, to collaborate as a group, either physically or within the actual digital document, and list each candidate's political position using a Google Doc. Now here, what we're doing is we're changing how it was being done before. No longer is the teacher lecturing. No, the students are kind of learning on their own. They're communicating, they're collaborating, 21st century skills. All right, and they're using a device to do that. So here we have a specific integrated instruction happening. The tools being used for a specific purpose. And the teacher, if it's happening in classroom, can monitor the media literacy that comes with the students reading online political platforms. They can monitor the use of the digital tool they're using, and they can monitor the 21st century skill of collaboration and media literacy that we're trying to teach. And then the last one here, transfigure. Here, the teacher invites political party candidates or their aides to a live discussion, either using Google Hangouts or Skype for Education. The teacher will also invite other classes from neighboring schools to participate in the discussion. Students have the opportunity to ask questions to the candidates, debate with students from other schools, as well as conduct live polls and view that data in real time. That's totally transforming. It's something much more beautiful than what was happening up here in the pencil stage. We're connecting students to opportunities they didn't have otherwise because the device is there. But look at all the skills that are being taught in that. Look at the media literacy. Look at the information literacy. Look at the collaboration. Look at students communicating with other groups of people. There's just lots that happens there. But you can walk a teacher from here, from the pencil stage to the Assimilate stage. You can walk a teacher from Assimilate to Redesign. So the model offers an opportunity for schools to move teachers along the continuum to train them to get better at using technology in the classroom. I know we're running out of time, so I'm going to kind of skip over these slides, but I'm pulling this right out of the book because I think it's important for you to have it. I want you to be able to read it. I think it helps to clarify a lot of this. That's the Assimilate stage, that's the Redesign stage, and that's, again, the Transfiguration stage as well. It's just another example of it. It's taken, the example here is spelling words in a second grade classroom. Of how you can use it with pen and paper, and then how you would use it with the Assimilate, the Redesign, and the Transfigure stages as well. You go to list website right here. Let me copy that for you. Give me 1 second. Head over to the chat room. I'm gonna post it right here. If you go to that one right there, it should take you to a lesson plan page. Of course, you need permission. Okay, I'm back. So this is the link that will take you to the lesson plan page. What you will need to do when you get there, because again, I'm on a different computer. I had everything set up downstairs in my other office. I apologize. But this link will take you to the lesson plan. It'll take you there. It'll show you how to use technology, how to choose which level of web's depth of learning you want, or depth of knowledge you want to use, which 21st century tools you're going to use. It's going to walk you through that whole process. Now, onto the list of digital tools. So what I've done is, over the years, I have scoured the internet for awesome tools that our students use and that teachers use. And I have kind of handpicked which tools would be best utilized at what level of the ART continuum. In the Assimilate continuum, and the Redesign continuum, or the Transfigure stage, which tools. And so here we have the Comic Puppet, as you can see, Padlet, Twidgeducate, which is like Twitter for education. It's pretty cool. Prezi, Glogster, EduSite, Telegami, Crash Course is good stuff. But this is stuff these are tools that you can teach your teachers how to use in the classroom that lend themselves very well to the Assimilate stage. Now, I need to let you know that some of these tools do cross over between the stages as well. Some can be used in Assimilate and in the Redesign. They're not set for just one, but when you look at the basic premise of each tool, I try to fit them into the stage that I think is most appropriate for them. Redesign, there's Curriculate, that's good stuff. Duolingo is good stuff. Of course, Khan Academy, Kahoot, Nearpod. Of course, Google Forms and Flubaroo, that's good. Educanon Rocks, if you're not using it, it's good stuff. Google Docs with Read and Write's good. Riddle's good. So here's some tools that you could use if you wanted teachers to be practicing or getting better at the Redesign stage. And then lastly is the Transfigure stage. And in this stage, there's some really powerful tools out there. Virtual debate's awesome. It's a great idea. Seesaw is good. Explain Everything is good. Blend Space. Google Hangouts, it's fantastic, as you guys all know. EduCurious. There's lots of awesome tools. And in the book, in my book, I have over 30 pages of different tools with an explanation of each tool and where to use it. All right, so that really is it in a nutshell. I know I covered a lot of information in 1 hour. I apologize for that. It really is. It's 194 pages trying to be condensed down into a 45-minute to a 1 hour presentation. There's a lot there. But again, what we're looking at is how can we take those tools that are organic to our students' lives, to our teachers' lives? How can we use those tools to teach those skills that we know students need to be successful in today's economy? How can we also create a blended model, a lesson plan that will take the depth of knowledge, the kind of consumption that we know our students need to have into consideration, so we can prepare our students to be successful in this 21st century economy. And then one last shameless plug for me. Here's some details on the book. It's called Blending Instruction with Technology, a blueprint for teachers to create unique, engaging, and effective learning experiences. It's being published by a fantastic publishing company in New York, New Jersey, New Jersey/New York. It's Roman and Littlefield. It hits the shelves this month. I prefer to call it The Art of Blended Learning, but those are the words that the publisher said show up the most on any internet search. So that's the name that they have created. I know it's been an hour. I will leave those links. I will leave them there. I'm not going to touch those. I apologize for not being able to get to those links now. We didn't have time. But you are more than welcome to look at those. You're going to need to have access as well, probably, if you want to take a look at it and edit it and download it yourself. Feel free to do that. Shoot me an email. Just ask for access, and I'll give it to you. What is mine is yours. My casa, su casa. I guess, is there any questions for me?
Hey, Mike, this is Carrie. Do you have the question panel up there still?
Give me 1 second. I got to switch over.
Okay.
I have the Q&A panel. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, there were a couple of things on there. Awesome. One of them was the one question I had. Do you remember who that was that gave the concept of the 30 to 40% of classroom
Harvard
time?
University.
Who was that?
Harvard University.
I've heard of them.
Author of the study, I cannot remember.
Okay.
But I remember it was Harvard University. It came out in October or November. And yeah, it is, as I'm looking at those questions, it is 30 to 40% of classroom time.
Great. I think Megan was asking about how do we blend this approach to pacing guides to cover the depth of the requirements of the standards. That was early on.
That's a great question. It really is. You know what's really, really cool about this, if I'm understanding her question properly, is the when the Common Core standards came out, they were using Webb's depth of knowledge actually to go through and categorize those standards. And so when we start thinking about how we pace that, obviously there's certain things that when you look at the standards and you look at the depth of knowledge that the students need to have, in my mind's eye, that really helps me figure out pacing. Because if something's a superficial, like a level 1 depth of knowledge, where it's just recall or reproducing, we don't spend as much time on that because that's not hard for our brains to comprehend. That's not the difficult piece. What becomes more challenging for our brains, because the processing that happens with the frontal cortex and the whole executive function, is the levels 3 and 4 when it comes to Webb's depth of knowledge. And I like the fact that they've categorized that for us. So when I look at those standards, when I start seeing 3s and 4s, I know I need to spend some more time on it. So when I'm looking at my curriculum app, when I'm looking at pacing, and I hope this is the question she's asking. When I'm looking at pacing, I look at those Common Core standards and our standards through the lens of Webb's depth of knowledge, because that gives me an idea of how much time I need to spend on that specific content. Does that make sense?
It does to me. I
hope it makes sense to Megan.
I don't know if Megan.
You can get my email. Heck, give me a phone call. I don't care.
Perfect. The other question was that I had too was about that assessment you mentioned. Is that something that we could use too?
Yes. That slide was the assessment linked. It should have been linked there, wasn't it not?
Okay. We'll pull those back out and put it out on the post area for the event. We'll put it out in the post.
I've made it really easy. I've only made it an 8-question assessment. I considered a 24-question assessment, but when I went through all of my research years ago for my dissertation, one thing that I learned, whenever you're surveying teachers, the shorter the better.
Definitely.
The shorter the better. So I had a much better completion rate when I kept it at 8 questions versus 24 questions. So I'm sorry, versus 16 questions, not 24, sorry, versus 16 questions. So it's 8 questions, but it gives you a great starting point of where your skills are on the continuum.
Okay, great. Is there anything else you have to share or show or demo or?
I wish, I probably do, but I wish I had time. I'm interviewing for we were interviewing for a position here at Buckeye, so I need to go down and hit those interviews.
Yes, duty calls. So I'll take
you, man, running a small school takes up all your time. But I appreciate Megan's questions.
Yeah.
And I love the comment where she says she loves the idea of the continuum.
Yeah.
I'm excited that someone else likes it too, because I like it.
Yep, it looks good, Mike. So thanks again for doing this. You can stop sharing your screen, and then I'll take over and finish this all up, and we'll get the links out on the Google Plus page and on the YouTube description page as well. And
I'm back. There I am. Hi, Megan.
All right. And if there's, well, one other thing I do want to mention again, thanks again, Mike, for putting this all together and sharing your book with us and your ideas. It's a wonderful start, especially the tools list. I think people will really benefit from if they're looking for ideas with their teachers, as well as these strategies to move from one to another, one phase. So I do want to just share, we do have one other event, TILO Presents event coming up, and this will be in a couple weeks. We've got our last one probably for the year until maybe the summer. We don't know if we're gonna have some summer ones. And this will, I believe, sending out an email soon on this regarding signing up and registering for this new one with Charles Slutz from Summit Academy. He's going to share GAF tools for internet safety training. And again, a lot of these are available on our website, our calendar on our website. I haven't updated the calendar with the details yet for that session, but that'll be updated this week. By next week, definitely, with the registration. So check out the website again. It's tiloohio.org. if you're interested. And other than that, I'd just like to go back and thanks again, Mike, for presenting.
You're welcome. Thank you for listening.
All right. And we'll sign out from here.
All right. Thanks, Carrie. Have a good day.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye-bye.